All of you woke up this early morning and asked yourself, how in the world could I make my own hard apple cider? Well, you're in luck because today I will be teaching you how. So you might be asking, why did I pick kind of such an out there topic? Well, I have been homebrewing my own wine for approximately 2 years now. It's been a really, really fun hobby. You can see that I've made red wines, I've made orange wines, I've made strawberry wines, and I've gotten some fantastic feedback from it all. Some of the feedback I've gotten is, it tastes like rubber. It's not horrible. And my all-time personal favorite, and I will act it out for you, it's really good. So it's been a very long process of trying to learn how to better myself with my homemade winemaking. One thing I have yet to try is hard apple cider. Some differences from apples to the wine that I'm making is it uses apples, obviously, and is known for a sweet, puckering taste. Cider is unfiltered compared to juice, which is filtered, which you'll see in the liquid that I have pictures very soon. It's one of the oldest alcoholic beverages, drink as early as 55 BC, even earlier than some like beer and things like that. Less popular now due to the space required for orchards. Unfortunately, the trees are just very big and takes up a lot of space, but it is gaining popularity in recent years. Here are the bare necessities that you need to make your own, and I know it seems like a lot, but here's kind of the gear that I've been using. We have our carboy, which is used to hold the cider, a sanitizer, the actual apple cider that I bought from the store, yeast, airlock, siphon, and bottles for the end product. The ciders that I will be making today are the bare bones hard cider, which is just cider and yeast, nothing else, very simple. The second cider I'll be making is a cinnamon kick hard cider, where I add cinnamon and sugar for higher alcohol percentage. I call it my Frankenstein. I like being a little like chemist when I do my wines, which probably might be why I've gotten all that feedback. Step number 1 is to sanitize, one of the most important steps. If we have any type of bacteria inside of our brew, it could ruin the whole batch. So to make sure it's very clean, I use a food-grade sanitizer called One Step. The next thing is to measure. This is unnecessary if you're making your own, but we measure it here, and what it measures is the total dissolved solids that are inside of your unfermented liquid. Again, the higher the sugar, the more alcohol will come from your product. And I'll explain that in a second. The one that I did not add any sugar has 6%, which makes sense. Most apple ciders are 6%. And the one I added sugar is 8%. So how in the world do we get alcohol? This is done through ethanol fermentation, also called alcoholic fermentation. When the yeast converts sugars, glucose, sucrose, etc., it got cut off a little bit from my PowerPoint, but basically it converts the sugars into both carbon dioxide and ethanol, which is the alcohol. The more sugar, the more ethanol, which means the more alcohol the yeast can potentially make. Step number 3 is going to be to pour. We're going to put all of our cider into our jugs, and again, you can see that it's not very clear because I'm using cider instead of juice. Number 4 is to add whatever you need. I added some extra sugar to my other one, and I also added cinnamon sticks. Number 5 is to add yeast. This is what's going, again, to make that alcohol. Very, very important. And you can see what's interesting is all I used was half a teaspoon of yeast for a whole gallon batch of cider. You don't need very much. Step number 6 is to wait for it. You can see this in my little container. It's very, very dark, but they're actually behind here where there's no light that could damage the yeast and the fermentation process. And that's it. Just have to wait for about 1 to 2 months. Or maybe longer. It all depends. Probably one of the most frustrating things when making your own wine and cider, etc., is just the long process it takes for that yeast to convert into ethanol to create that alcohol. So it takes a lot of time till you get to actually taste your product and see how you did. Here's the fermentation at work. You can see very briefly some of the CO2 being built up inside of it. One reason we have these little airlocks on the top is that we don't get any contaminants inside of it. And we're going to get a lot of the CO2 kind of bubbling out of here with this water. You can see some bubbling right there. This is going to make sure that that container does not explode, which would be very unfortunate. Number 7, I'm not there yet, so I used a Google image to explain here, is the bottle. After waiting 1 to 2 months, we're going to bottle it into different bottles so that we can drink it. And then we have to, again, wait for it for another 2 to 6 months until we are ready to actually fully drink this. A lot of times we know that when we buy a wine, they say you got to age it for however long. And a lot of wines that you buy are already 1 to 2 to 3 years old. This kind of allows the yeast to kind of mature, and you can taste more of what is inside of the wine or the cider, whatever you're making. Step number 9, my favorite part, is to enjoy it. You're going to sample your creation throughout the process and, of course, the end product. Make notes for future batches. This is probably one of the most important steps that I never really did, and now I am doing, because after a whole half a year, you kind of forget what you did in the beginning. If it turns out great, share it with friends and family. That's the whole point. You're creating this so that you can show everyone else what you've made, and they can all enjoy what you created. Or, of course, if it's really good, hug it to yourself. In the end, you are drinking something that you created. So take pleasure in the fact that you created something that someone could have just bought at the store. That's one of the most, that's the greatest thing that comes with making your own homemade apple cider. Thank you so much.